the choice beneath the city. The crystal walls were still ringing with the echo of lightning when Zuko understood, with the strange clarity of a man watching his own house burn down, that he had just become an exile twice over. Azula's bolt had not hit Aang. It hadn't hit Zuko either, though for one suspended half-second he'd thought it would, thought this is it. This is what jumping in front of a firebending prodigy gets you. And then his own arm had moved without his permission, a clumsy redirect he'd only half learned, and the lightning had gone wild, spearing into the crystal pillar behind Azula instead. The pillar shattered. Light and stone dust filled the chamber. Azula was already screaming something that wasn't words anymore, just fury given sound, and Zuko was standing between his sister and the Avatar with his hands still raised in the wrong stance, the stance of someone protecting instead of attacking. "You," Azula said, and stopped, because there wasn't a word for it. "Brother, traitor, both, now, forever, stitched together so tightly no one would ever pry them apart again." "Azula," his voice came out steadier than he felt. "Stop, this doesn't have to." "Doesn't have to what?" Her blue fire was building again, coiling at her fingertips, and behind her composure he could see something he had genuinely never seen on his sister's face before. She was frightened, not of him, of the version of events where this wasn't simple anymore. "You're choosing the Avatar, you're choosing him over." "I'm not choosing him over anything," which was a lie, or the truth wearing a disguise, he wasn't sure which. "I'm choosing not to be this anymore." She came at him, he blocked, redirected again, and the strange new economy of his body, the part of him that had apparently decided 3 seconds ago to become a different person, kept him moving backward, toward Aang, toward the others, instead of forward into the kind of fight that would end with one of them on the ground. It was Iroh's voice that broke it, booming through the chamber as he and the other Dai Li agents and the chaos of the larger battle spilled into the crystal antechamber. "Azula, enough." She looked at her uncle, she looked at her brother, something in her face closed like a door. "Fine," she said, and her voice had gone light and terrible, the way it always did right before she decided something unforgivable. "Keep him, then. He's not worth chasing." She said it like she was discarding a piece on a pie show board, and Zuko felt the words land somewhere under his ribs even though he'd known, that this was the trade he was making. She was gone in a sweep of blue flame and Dai Li agents falling into formation around her, and then it was just the 6 of them in the wrecked, glittering dark, Zuko, Iroh, and on the other side of an invisible line that none of them had quite decided how to cross yet, Aang, Katara, and the slowly arriving Sokka and Toph, who'd been fighting their way through the tunnels and arrived to find the entire equation of the war rearranged. No one said anything for a long moment. The crystals hummed faintly, settling. Aang spoke first. He always did. "Zuko," he said, testing the name like it might still be a trap. "I'm not going to hurt you," Zuko said, and heard how useless that sounded, how it was the kind of thing the person who was about to hurt you would also say. Katara found her voice before anyone else, and it came out as something closer to violence than speech. "Get away from him." She had a water whip half formed already, ice crackling at the edges of it, and she put herself bodily between Aang and Zuko like she expected this to be a delayed fuse betrayal, like he'd simply chosen a more elaborate way to do the thing he'd already done to them in Ba Sing Se's tea shops and tunnels for weeks now, the thing he'd done at the North Pole, the thing his entire existence in their story had been. "Katara," Aang put a hand on her arm, I saw what he just did." Her eyes didn't leave Zuko. "I want to know what he's going to do next." It was a fair question. Zuko didn't have an answer, because he hadn't planned past the lightning. He'd had approximately one thought in the last 10 seconds, and it had been not him, and everything after that was uncharted. "I don't know," he admitted, which felt like the first true thing he'd said in this room. "I didn't think this far," comforting Sokka said, arriving at a near run with his club still in hand, taking in the scene, his sister in a defensive crouch, Aang looking strangely lit up despite the rubble and the danger, Iroh standing with the weary calm of a man who'd been expecting this for years, and Zuko, on what was apparently their side of the room now, with the flat, assessing look of someone doing math he didn't like the answer to. "So the guy who's chased us across 2 poles and a desert just decided, what, today's the day he stops." "It's not a decision I can take back," Zuko said. "She's not going to forgive this. I don't get to go home and explain that I was confused. You don't get a lot of sympathy from me for losing the thing you spent 3 years trying to get," Katara said. "Forgive me if I don't feel bad that hunting us finally cost you something." It struck true enough that Zuko didn't argue. Toph, who had been silent, head tilted, reading the room the way she read everything, through the vibrations under her bare feet, through the things people's bodies did that their voices tried to hide, finally spoke. "His heartbeat's not lying," she said, with the same tone she might use to report the weather. It's all over the place, but it's not lying. He's not bluffing anybody. He's just having the worst day of his life in real time, albeit possibly the worst day of his life that we're responsible for, which is kind of funny, actually, when you think about it. Tough, Sokka said. What? I'm being helpful. He's not faking. That's useful information. You're welcome. It was, in its way, the first piece of mercy anyone had offered him, and it came wrapped in something so blunt it barely registered as mercy at all. Zuko found he was grateful for it anyway. They didn't trust him. He hadn't expected them to, but knowing a thing and feeling it land in your chest as actual, physical wariness. Sokka's grip never quite leaving his club, Katara's eyes tracking his hands every time they moved. The careful 3 feet of space the group maintained around him as they picked their way up out of the crystal catacombs into the ruined hush of Upper Ba Sing Se, smoke-stained and listing under the day's siege, were different categories of understanding. They did not talk about it directly, not yet. There was too much else burning. The city had fallen, or was in the agonized process of falling. The Earth King fleeing on his bear, long fangs daily in open mutiny against everyone including each other. The Fire Nation's occupation already unrolling its administrative machinery over a capital it had spent 100 years failing to take by force and one afternoon taking by treachery. Appa was found, eventually, exhausted and singed but alive, in the upper ring, and that single piece of good news did more to thaw the silence than anything Zuko could have said. They flew, up and away from the smoke, out past the outer wall, until the city was a gray smudge against green hills and the only sound was wind and Appa's tired wing beats. No one had decided, exactly, that Zuko and Ira were coming with them. It had simply happened, the way a person falling off a cliff doesn't decide to fall. There had been a moment of choice, far above, and everything since was just gravity working itself out. They put down for the night in a stand of trees above a ravine, far enough from the smoke of Ba Sing Se that the sky was clean and ordinary, stars coming up cold and indifferent to everything that had happened that day. Nobody built the fire near Zuko, he noticed. He didn't blame them. I want to understand something, Sokka said, once they'd eaten, a tense, quiet meal, Ira contributing a startlingly good soup out of whatever he'd had folded into his robes, because apparently the man could not stop being himself even in catastrophe, and the others had arranged themselves around the small fire with Zuko and his uncle sitting slightly apart, not quite outside the circle, not quite in it. You hunted us, for months, you set traps, you worked with Combustion Man, who, by the way, blew up part of a mountain trying to get to us, and today you just flipped a switch. It wasn't a switch. Zuko stared into the fire. The flames did what every fire did, leapt and guttered in a language he understood better than almost anything else in his life, and right now even that felt unfamiliar, like the rules might have changed along with everything else. I've been flipping for a long time. I just finally landed somewhere instead of going back and forth forever. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He looked up, made himself meet Sokka's eyes, because looking away would have read as exactly the kind of cowardice that had defined half his life. I spent 3 years convinced that the only way to be whole again, to deserve my place, my name, my father's, was to capture the Avatar. I told myself that so many times it stopped feeling like a lie and started feeling like the truth. And then in there, today, watching my sister get ready to kill him, he stopped, recalibrated, watching my sister get ready to kill all of you. I understood that I didn't actually want that. I'd never wanted that. I wanted to belong somewhere, and I picked the worst possible way to try to earn it, for years, because it was the only way anyone ever offered me. That's a very moving speech, Katara said, and her voice had ice in it that had nothing to do with her bending. You know what it doesn't include? An apology. You almost killed me at the North Pole. You chased Aang into a cave and helped Azula corner him there too, until apparently 30 seconds ago. None of that disappears because you had a change of heart in a pretty room full of crystals. I'm not asking it to disappear. Good, because it doesn't. She drew her knees up, arms wrapped around them, and for a second the fury cracked into something rawer, exhaustion, maybe, or grief for a year of running that this didn't undo. I don't know what you want from us. Forgiveness? Trust? Because I don't have either to give you tonight. Maybe not for a long time. I don't want anything from you tonight, Zuko said. I don't think I've earned the right to want anything yet. Tough, lying on her back with her arms folded behind her head, looking at the stars she couldn't see, made a small sound that might have been approval. That's the first smart thing you've said since the tunnels. Aang had been quiet through most of it, which was, in its own way, the loudest thing in the camp. He sat a little apart, knees drawn up, the staff resting against his shoulder, and his face kept doing something complicated, flickering between wonder and wariness and a kind of grief Zuko didn't fully understand until Aang spoke. "You knew Azula my whole life," Aang said, finally, not quite to Zuko, more to the fire. "Both of you did. You grew up with her, and you still, when it mattered, you still picked the other side." He looked up. "Doesn't that feel like losing something? Even if it's the right thing?" It was such an Aang question, earnest, and aimed unerringly at the wound, that for a second Zuko didn't know how to answer it. "Yes," he said finally, "it feels like losing everything. I don't have a home right now. I don't have a father who'll claim me. My sister will probably try to kill me the next time she sees me, and she'll mean it more than she's ever meant anything." He exhaled. "But I don't think that's the same as losing something I should have kept." Aang nodded slowly, like he was turning it over, fitting it next to his own losses, his people, his world, the version of himself that got to grow up slow and ordinary. "I used to think the Fire Nation was just one thing, one enemy. It's strange, knowing it has people like you in it, people who didn't want this and got stuck inside it anyway. Most of it isn't like me," Zuko said. "I want to be careful you don't walk away thinking that. Most of the Fire Nation believes exactly what we were taught to believe. I only stopped because I had 100 reasons to stop and the conscience to finally notice them, and even then, it took me 3 years and my uncle saying things to me about 100 times before they landed." He glanced at Ira, who was watching the exchange with the particular stillness of someone trying very hard not to interrupt his nephew's first attempt at honesty. "Don't mistake one defector for an army changing its mind." "I won't," Aang said, and then, with a strange resilience that seemed to be the actual core of him, underneath the airbending and the avatarness and the weight of the world, "But it's something. It's not nothing, that you're here." It was the closest thing to welcome anyone had offered, and it cost Aang visibly to offer it. Zuko could see Katara's sharp glance at him, see Sokka's jaw tighten, but Aang held the line anyway, the way he seemed to hold every line, with hope stubbornly outpacing his evidence. It was Ira, eventually, who addressed what no one else wanted to say aloud. "You will not trust him tonight," the old man said, to the fire generally, in the tone of someone narrating a fact of weather rather than offering an opinion. "You should not. Trust is not a door that opens because someone says the right words on the worst day of his life. It is built slowly, the way a wall is built, one stone at a time, and you cannot skip to the top." He looked at Zuko, and there was love in it, and something like grief too, because Ira had also lost a country today, a brother, a life he'd long stopped wanting but had still, in some unexamined way, kept as an option. "But I have watched my nephew for a long time. I have watched him want to be good before he knew how, and do terrible things while reaching for it anyway. What happened today was not him performing a new role. It was him stopping, for the first time, the performance entirely." "That's nice," Sokka said, "but you're his uncle. You're contractually obligated to think he's redeemable." "I am not obligated to think anything," Ira said, mildly. "I think it because I have seen it. You do not have to take my word. Take his actions instead, over the weeks and months to come, and let them tell you what kind of man he has actually become." He smiled, faint and tired. "That is all any of us can offer anyone, time, and the chance to prove it with something other than words." It was, Zuko thought, exactly the kind of thing his uncle would say, generous and true and entirely unhelpful for the part of him that wanted, badly, to be believed right now, and he understood, with the slow ache of finally growing up a little, that wanting to be believed immediately was itself part of the old selfish reflex, the one that had always needed everyone to see him as already redeemed instead of letting him do the actual, unglamorous work of becoming someone different. Sleep didn't come easily to anyone. Zuko lay near the edge of the camp, not by exile, exactly, more by mutual unspoken agreement, the kind of distance everyone needed to feel safe enough to close their eyes, and stared up at a sky he'd watched from a dozen ships, 100 campfires, always chasing, never arriving. It looked the same as it always had. That felt unfair, somehow. He'd just detonated his entire life and the stars hadn't even bothered to rearrange themselves about it. He heard footsteps before he saw who they belonged to, light, deliberate, bare feet on dry grass, and didn't need to turn his head to know. Toph dropped down beside him without asking, which seemed to be her general policy about everything, and sat with her knees up, facing the dark instead of him. "You're not sleeping," she said, not a question. "No, heart's still going too fast for someone who's supposedly resting." She picked at a blade of grass, tore it in half. "Want to know what I think? Since apparently nobody's asked, and I have opinions, and not asking me is honestly an oversight on everyone's part. Sure, I think everyone back there is busy deciding whether you're lying. Sokka's running the numbers. What do you gain? What's the trick? Where's the angle? Katara's not even doing math, she's just furious, and underneath the furious she's scared, because she actually let herself hope for a second back in the tunnels, and hoping is the thing she trusts least in the world right now. Twinkledoes is doing the thing where he decides to believe in people before they've earned it, because that's just how he's built, and one day it's going to either save all of us or get him killed, and nobody knows which yet. She paused, and I think none of that's actually the interesting question. What's the interesting question? Whether you believe it. She turned toward him then, sightless eyes finding his face with the uncanny precision she always managed, reading something in the air or the ground or the rhythm of his pulse that he couldn't hide from her no matter how still he held his face. Not whether you can convince us, whether you actually think you're the guy who did that back there, or whether some part of you is already planning how to take it back if your dad opens the door a crack. The question landed somewhere underneath his sternum, exact and unwelcome, the way her questions usually did. I don't know, he said, because lying to Toph had always seemed both impossible and pointless. I want to be the guy who did that. I don't know yet if I am, all the way through, or if I'm just someone who got lucky for one afternoon. Good answer, Toph said, and there was something almost like approval in it, rough edge and entirely without softness, which suited her, and which suited him better than gentleness would have. Wrong answer would have been yes, obviously, I'm totally a good guy now. That's the answer liars give. Liars are always sure. You're not sure. That's the only reason I don't think you're full of it. That's a strange kind of compliment. I don't do the other kind. She lay back in the grass, hands behind her head, posture mirroring Aang's from earlier, though her face held none of his careful hope, just frank, unsentimental appraisal, the kind that didn't need to be kind to be fair. Here's the thing, Sparky, nobody in that camp actually knows what to do with you. You're not an enemy anymore, but you're not one of us either, not yet. You're just this thing that happened today that we all have to figure out how to carry. Katara's going to hate you out loud for a while, because that's easier than the alternative, which is admitting she might eventually not hate you, and she's not ready for that yet. Sokka's going to watch you like you might bite. Twinkledoes is going to be nice to you in this exhausting, hopeful way that's going to make you feel guilty for every bad thing you've ever done, probably on purpose, though I don't think he even realizes he does it. And you, me, I don't really care about your sob story. She said it without cruelty, just flat fact, the way she said everything. I care whether you're useful, whether you're honest, and whether you're going to do something stupid and burn down the camp in your sleep because you're having a nightmare about your dad. Everything else is everyone else's problem to sort out. I just wanted you to know somebody around here isn't going to make you grovel for a seat at the fire. You want to sit there, earn your spot with what you do tomorrow, not with how sad you look tonight. It was, Zuko thought, the strangest kindness he had ever been offered, utterly without warmth, without reassurance, without a single soft word in it, and somehow it was the first thing all day that had actually made something in his chest loosen. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me. I haven't decided anything yet either. But she didn't get up to leave, and after a moment, in the dark, with the fire burned down to embers behind them and the others' breathing gone slow and uneven with half sleep, she added, almost as an afterthought, almost gently for her. You did something today that cost you literally everything you had. I don't know if it makes you good, but it's the kind of thing only someone who'd already started changing could do. People who are still pretending don't jump in front of lightning for someone they've spent 3 years hunting. They run the numbers first. You didn't run any numbers. That's worth something, even if none of us know yet what. She got up, brushed the grass off her clothes with brisk efficiency, and started back toward the dim shape of the camp, then paused. For what it's worth, she said, not turning around. I think you're going to be okay. Not tonight, not for a while, probably, but okay eventually. You've got that going for you, even if everyone else in there is too busy being mad at you to say it. Why are you the one telling me? Because somebody had to, and everybody else has too much history with you to say it without it being complicated. A small, almost smile in her voice, the closest she came to warmth, delivered the way she delivered everything, sideways, blunt, entirely on her own terms. I don't have any history with you. You're just a new guy who did something interesting today. That makes it easy for me to just tell you the truth. She walked back to the fire, and a few minutes later Zuko heard the particular silence of someone actually asleep, the kind that meant she'd said what she came to say and felt no further need to perform around it. He lay back in the grass, the sky unchanged above him, the war not won, his family not regained, nothing fixed and very little certain. Katara's fury still banked and waiting for morning, Sokka's vigilance not gone but merely sleeping. Aang's hope a fragile, hard-won thing that could still curdle into disappointment if Zuko proved unworthy of it, his own father somewhere in a palace deciding, by now, exactly how to describe a son who no longer existed to him. But for the first time since the lightning, since the choice, since the long 3 years of running toward the wrong thing as hard as he possibly could, something in his chest had gone quiet instead of clenched. Okay, eventually, she'd said. He didn't believe it yet, but he found, lying there under the same and different stars, that he wanted to. It was, he thought, probably the first thing he'd wanted in a long time that had nothing to do with proving himself to anyone at all. He closed his eyes, and for the first night in longer than he could remember, he did not dream of his father's voice.